Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you are on this fast forward planet, which is wrapped in so many layers of turbulence and change that's hard to keep track. I try to do that on Sustain What by unpacking issues or having conversations with people just to get a sense of trajectory. How do we have a better communication environment? How do we have a better actual biogeophysical environment? And today we're going to circle into the world of journalism through Sammy Roth, who's a great energy and climate reporter. He has deep passions. He's committed to this train that I stepped onto in 1985, which it's hard for me to believe. When I was writing about nuclear winter, actually, when I was at NCAR, I went to NCAR in 1984. I don't, Sammy, you're older than that, right? But not
No,
not that
I'm
much.
not. I'm not. Sorry, Andy. You've been doing this since before I was born.
So seriously, oh my God.
No, seriously. I was born in 1992, so you've got years and years on me. You've laughed
Oh
me a
my
bunch of
Lord.
times.
I'm going to just stop right now because I can hand off to you. Yeah.
That's
So,
it. We're done.
and now there's this threat to shut down NCAR. And, as a journalist, trying to figure out where's your starting point amid all of this is almost impossible. But Sammy, you started in the energy realm with work at the Desert Sun, which I guess became part of USA Today's
It was
ecosystem.
part of the Gannett Company, which is USA Today is the flagship. Yeah, I started there out of college in 2014.
That's cool. And you did a lot of good work there. Well, you've
Oh
done a
man,
lot of
you've
good
got
work.
my old page up. I'm kind of surprised that even still exists.
Yeah, well, it's not so recent the work, but there's your recent work.
Yeah,
So if anyone wants to dig back to the roots of Sammy's writing, just Google for Desert Sun and Sammy Roth, and you can find out
yeah.
work on water, on solar expansion and solar issues, regulatory questions, and then you went to the LA Times, obviously, where
Yep.
you
2018 started at the LA Times.
right, which is where I met you face to face pre-COVID when I was visiting Sewell Chan, who was the opinion editor at the time, I think. And I was really excited to meet you because I'd seen so much of the good work you were doing. Was 2000? When did you? How long ago did you start the column at the LA
So I
Times?
started as the energy reporter at the end of 2018, and then they made me the climate columnist in I think fall of 2023. So my last 2 years there was climate columns. And
Right,
I was
which
doing
gives
a
you your
weekly newsletter called Boiling Point for several
right,
years before that, which continued until the end.
right, and you've handed that all off. We'll get back to the LA Times in a minute, and because I want to focus on your new project first. And now here you are in the world of Substack,
Yes.
uh, which I joined. I guess something like it could be 3 years ago. I don't know. It all blends together. And so I thought let's start with you just sort of laying out a bit about your learning journey as a journalist on this beat. What initially got you back in the desert days, focused on energy, climate, water, and then maybe a little bit about the LA Times time, and then what brought you to this new domain.
Sure. I mean, I guess I was interested in climate change in college. I studied sustainable development and I worked on the student newspaper. And so I kind of wanted to put two and two together. And I mean, with climate change, it was pretty simplistic for me. I was interested in politics. I was one of those kids who just, had that kind of sensibility, and climate just felt like, why is this not simpler? I mean, even at the time, it just, 10 or 12, 15 years ago, I felt like, why have we not figured this out yet? This seems pretty straightforward. I'm sure you've been dealing with that for 40 years. And so I got interested in sustainable development and wanted to write about this stuff. And an energy reporter, I was from Los Angeles, and an energy reporter job opened up at the Desert Sun in Palm Springs, 2 hours outside of LA. And so that just clicked, and got really into the weeds and the wonkery of writing about utility regulation and solar development on public lands. I mean, Palm Springs turned out to be a fabulous place to be writing about energy and renewable energy in particular. Around 2014, 15, 16, the first large scale solar projects on public lands were being built and inaugurated with federal funding, like right as I was getting in there. This was the place where the large scale wind industry, sort of first came up. One of the first places that big windmills were built in the U.S. in the 70s and 80s, and those were still operating and getting repowered around the time I was there. There was also one of the world's best geothermal hotspots not far away, sort of within my coverage zone, down by the Salton Sea in California. And there were really interesting efforts to extract lithium from the geothermal brine that were just sort of in their early heyday. I mean, still haven't really come to fruition, but a lot more attention is attracted to that now, a decade later. And I was sort of in on the ground floor writing about that. So that was a great place to sort of be born as an energy reporter. So that was, it just, it was utterly fascinating. So I got into that then.
Actually, hold on, pause there for a second, because you brought up something really important.
Yeah.
You immediately got confronted with the complexities. There are environmentalists on both sides of all those issues. Siting solar panels, mining for green energy. So talk about that a little bit. Was that, you had said back when you were in university, it seemed simple, and then here you are in the desert, focused on turtles and solar panels and stuff. Was that kind of
a great point.
My gosh experience, or what?
It's funny. I don't necessarily remember being like taken aback or thrown by it. I just found it interesting. Because some of the very first stories I did, I mean, I spent years and years covering the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, which was a terrible acronym that I used way too many times, and I've since sworn off of acronym, the DRECP. But it was this big state federal effort in the desert in California to figure out, where do we put all of the solar farms, while, where do we allow developers to propose solar farms while balancing the need for big solar with conservation, with preserving wildlife habitat and species conservation and recreation, and balance all of these competing land uses on public lands in the desert. And so it was exactly protecting endangered tortoises and protecting Joshua trees and protect all of these species that frankly most people have never heard of. Oh, you have it up on your screen right here. Look at that.
There you go.
So confronting that and confronting lithium mining. I mean, the type of lithium extraction that I was looking at, extraction from the geothermal brine is relatively benign environmentally. I mean, this was a place that people were saying, hey, this is a way to get lithium without having to do that, sort of hard rock style extraction that's, going on elsewhere in other countries or even in other parts of the United States. But it still exposed me to all of that. With wind turbines, definitely was learning quite quickly about, avian impacts and birds and all that. So like I said, I don't remember thinking, oh my God, this isn't what I thought it would be. It was just like, wow, this is fascinating stuff. Like, these are hard stories. Like, people need to know all of this. And, with rooftop solar as well, one of the main storylines I was tracking those first few years was the battles over net metering in California, the incentive program by which people were compensated for the electricity that their rooftop solar panels generated, that they were compensated by their utility companies. And there were these really fierce battles being fought at the Public Utilities Commission in California, with this argument over, do these incentive programs result in higher electric rates for everybody else who doesn't have solar? And some people said, yes, that happens. And some people said, no, that's a fantasy invented by the utilities. There was a lot of disagreement. Ultimately, the incentive rates were reduced significantly so as to make sure that rates didn't go higher for everyone else, even though some people said that wasn't really happening. And that's a storyline I've continued to cover over the last 10 years, and that there's still significant disagreement about what the facts really are. So I've covered a lot of issues where, even among environmentalists, among people who care deeply about climate change, people are not on the same page about, what the facts are, even when they agree on the facts, what the right solutions are, what the right trade-offs are. That has never thrown me from, in climate colored goggles you see on the screen there. That's the title of my newsletter now. I think we should be evaluating everything through sort of climate as the first framework, climate as, sort of the highest imperative. I would say there are folks in the environmental movement who maybe don't see things that way or aren't operating in practice with that principle. And I think we should all be operating with that principle because of the urgency and because of the timelines that we need to operate on. But that doesn't mean that these stories aren't important, that we shouldn't be, at least have all the facts, understand what all the trade-offs are. And I've been doing that since the beginning.
Yeah. Do you think so? Your focus really is substantially on emissions reduction as the pathway you see most important at the moment.
I think so. I mean,
I mean, just to be sure we're
yeah,
clear, there's also vulnerability reduction, meaning making communities more
yeah.
resilient.
I'm not saying that that's not just as important in its own ways, and that there aren't other problems that are vital to resolve. I mean, the biodiversity crisis and vulnerability or adaptation, as you're saying, but I think that it's important that reducing emissions and the urgency of reducing emissions, even though the benefits won't be seen for longer, doesn't get lost amid all that. I think
Yeah,
I think that it's important that there are people really beating the drum hard on that,
right.
because there are politicians and activists who talk about climate change as existential. I think there's a pretty wide gap between the number of people saying climate change is an existential threat and the amount of action that's happening that actually treats long-term climate change and emissions reduction like an existential threat. And so I'm definitely in favor of taking that approach to my writing and my reporting.
Yeah, and so let's take this. We didn't let's jump back to LA Times stuff too, and maybe to again
Yeah.
the
Sorry, getting way
reality.
ahead of ourselves here.
No, I did it. It was my fault.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the LA Times, which was in between the Desert
Yeah.
Sun and now. What were the benefits and the challenges of that kind of arena? I was at the LA Times actually for a year. I was a reporter there in 1985, 86 when they were getting ready to start a science section like the New York
Oh, wow.
Times.
What was it
And
like? Now I'm curious.
I'll
What
tell
was
you,
that year like?
Noel
Yeah.
Greenwood was like the managing editor or something,
Yeah.
and he hired me out. I did a trial. I did like a competitive trial with Tom Mao. I don't know if you overlapped with Tom Mao.
No.
He was
No.
for a slot that they were going to create a weekly science section because they saw the New York Times was doing well with its science section. And while I was there on doing my first year, they hired me to work in the Valley, San Fernando Valley,
No.
bureau when there was a bureau.
Yeah,
And
not too many of those anymore.
no, I know. And then they decided the pencil pushers decided that they didn't need a science section because they were selling computer ads in the sports section. So it was like a pecuniary decision to not have a science section. And that's when I said, fuck this, excuse my language. And I got a job back in New York at Science Digest magazine. At Discover magazine in the late
You've
80s.
been in New York ever since, right?
Yeah, well, I was. Now I moved to Maine, but
Oh, okay.
I moved. I was in magazines. So I had a brief taste of the LA Times at a time when it was theoretically the greater version of it. So, what was your experience
Yeah.
there? And then the end game.
It's still a great newspaper, and I want to make sure it gets credit for that. There are so many good reporters at the LA Times, and for the most part, I had a really good experience there. I was hired in 2018 after Patrick Soon-Shiong bought the paper. It had been really cratering under the previous corporate ownership, and Dr. Patrick came in and bought the paper, and basically saved it and got a lot of credit for that, deservedly so. And I sort of came in under this first, really massive wave of hiring that helped restore a lot of the losses and the cuts that had been made to the staff. Thinking there was part of a wave over 6 months or a year of 100 or 150. A lot of new people were added to the paper. I forget the exact number. And they really brought up there was a really robust, and still is, a really robust climate and environment team. It's one of the strongest teams at the paper. I think at the peak, before we had a couple people take buyouts, and more recently, I think one or two folks, someone would be assigned to breaking news. But I think at the peak, there were like, I want to say 15 people, counting editors, on the climate and environment desk.
Wow.
I mean, it's still like maybe 10 or 12 people. I mean, it's a strong desk.
Yeah.
And I, just really fabulous colleagues, really, made great friends on that team. We got a water reporter and a wildfire reporter, and someone who does wildlife, and an investigative reporter, and someone covering utilities and doing investigations. I mean, it's, there's not another climate environment team like that anywhere, outside of the East Coast of the United States, in this country.
Right. Right.
It's certainly one of the few places that had a climate columnist, and they're actually
Yeah.
hiring for that job now, as I understand. Not to bring back a climate columnist, which is sort of a unique position they created for me, but to hire an energy reporter of some kind, which was the job that I was originally hired for.
Hmm.
No, I mean, what was great about it was that they pretty much just let me set my own agenda. I mean, I followed my nose, first with energy and then with climate more broadly. You know, see on the screen here with your scrolling, I had a pretty wide range of things. Anything that I just thought
Right.
was interesting or important, they let me cover, as long as there was, if the audience was there for it, and the audience was always there for it. Stuff all over California, the Western United States, as long as there was some kind of nexus or relationship to California. I started by doing a lot of the same types of energy policy and energy politics stuff that I did with the Desert Sun. I shifted, more towards climate commentary broadly, and ended up doing a lot of the sort of climate and culture stuff that I've now transitioned to full time with this newsletter. How climate relates to entertainment and sports and other sort of cultural industries that are important to California and the country. More political commentary, more national stuff, but no, I just they really let me run free, and that was great. I mean, more recently at the LA Times, as some folks may have heard, ownership has cut the budget a lot, and there's been a bunch of layoffs and buyouts, and the staff has really contracted as a whole at the paper, and it's become a somewhat more difficult place to work, which is why you've seen a lot of reporters leave voluntarily on top of the cuts, which has been unfortunate.
Right.
Um, but for most of my time there, it was a super positive experience.
And again, then you had the parting of ways. Was that kind of a buyout situation, I don't know if you don't have to talk about
No,
it, but
no, I
was
just
it
chose to
difficult
leave.
or sorry?
No, I just decided to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a couple different things. I mean, you've seen it happen. A lot of reporters are choosing to go to Substack, especially reporters who, and I was in the fortunate position that, over the years of, especially the years of writing a newsletter. I mean, I've been writing. I mean, at the Desert Sun, I'd been writing a weekly newsletter called The Current, and then especially at the LA Times, writing Boiling Point for the last 5 years. It sort of built up a personal following, and so I was in the sort of privileged position of thinking, okay, if I go to Substack, I think a lot of folks will follow me there and be willing to pay for it. And so, like plenty of other journalists in that position, I made the Substack decision and just thought, I think I can support myself rather than depend on a legacy media institution. So yeah, part of it was just LA Times has been, in sort of bad shape. It's not that
Yeah.
I think my job is in danger here, but it's just going a little bit downhill with, where the business is going, and it's a little bit frustrating. And I'd rather just go out on my own and have a little more freedom and control to just totally try new things, and uh, not have to worry about what's going on with the LA Times, and just
Right.
be completely free here. And that was
Really
fun.
be your own voice.
Yeah, and again, I don't
Forward.
want to create the wrong impression here. Nobody was interfering with what I was writing at the LA Times. Like, I was
Yeah.
totally, there was no editorial interference at all. It was a good situation there, in terms of the content. But there is something just really nice about not having to worry about the legacy media business model, and who you're working for. And I mean, there was a lot of consternation at the LA Times over the opinion desk and interference
Right.
with the editorial board, and that was always kind of lingering in the background and frustrating. But really, the main thing for me was that I decided that rather than writing mostly about climate policy and politics, I wanted to do this climate and culture thing full time. And for folks who are interested, climatecoloredgoggles.com is where they can sign up. I, I just started to sort of come to this personal revelation or realization that so many of the issues I was writing about, these battles over rooftop solar, and, where to build large renewable energy projects, and just climate politics in general in the United States, the stuff I'd been writing about for 10 or 12 years, I got to a point where it just felt like I was writing the same stories again and again, and things were not changing that much. And,
Right.
I know probably for you, it's like you've been doing this for 40 years and I was doing this for, 12 years. So it's like, come on, Sammy, it's like you can keep going at this a little longer. But I just felt like, okay, what's the problem here? Why why am I feeling so frustrated that that I'm just kind of like hitting the same wall again and again, and people are having the same arguments that they were having when I started doing this in 2014. And I started to find that the stories that were the most fulfilling to me were the ones in the cultural arena. When I would write about, what are the movies and TV shows that are, telling innovative and interesting stories about climate change, and what's going on in the advertising and marketing world, and some of the interesting campaigns there, and what's happening in the world of sports. People who are
Right.
trying to get teams to engage on this. When I did media criticism on occasion, I found it pretty fulfilling. So I just started to think about what are the cultural levers that can really be engaged to get people thinking differently about climate, in a way that might lead to longer term, more sustainable political change.
Right.
And so that was kind of when I started to think, okay, that's the stuff I really want to be writing about here. How can we leverage culture in a way that might ultimately help fix the politics and the policy that are so broken. That's what I want to write about full time. How to get people to think differently. And so that's what led me to Climate Colored Goggles, Climate and Culture.
Right.
Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble. Where do you want to go
No, no,
next?
no, no.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful because in a practical way,
Yeah.
the climate journalism world, the media are imploding overall, right?
Yeah.
And generalists, sort of the general news media world is imploding. The capacity of the average newspaper outside the LA Times and New York Times to cover climate capacity and interest is kind of imploding. But within the realm of climate journalism, there's an explosion. There's, Emily Atkin, a lot of your our friends on Substack have their niches, and coming through that process you were just describing of finding where your passion is strongest
Yeah.
will help you find your place amid that whole
Yeah.
array. Here's the bestsellers in climate environment. Emily, was an early starter here along with David Roberts. David's been interesting. He was a real generalist too. And
David
then
does some really interesting stuff. I'm glad he exists. I,
and he
I love.
focuses entirely on the energy transition and
Yeah.
really, deep into like the lithium battery supply chain arena, and he's thriving. And Bill McKibben is more of the sort of the activist journalist with a a longstanding following. Emily is very much about the fossil fuel accountability, like others who are not on Substack, like Amy Westerfeld. So I think going through that process of finding your niche is really a key thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that there's so much good traditional climate journalism that's happening, and I'm very grateful that it still exists. I mean, in some ways I feel bad about leaving the newspaper role, because I still depend on what the LA Times is reporting and what the New York Times is reporting, and
Right.
nonprofits like Canary Media and High Country News and Inside Climate, like they play such a vital role. And so there's a part of me that's like, man, I you know that that's an incredible service, and why did I stop doing that? But also, yeah, there's an audience for this. There's, I think, a need for it. I've been grateful to find that there's people who are willing to support the niche and non-traditional role that I'm taking on here, and so I'm excited to keep finding my voice and finding different angles, and like I said, I think that people want what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and getting back to your pieces on car culture, which
Yeah.
is so much a California thing, and not just California. I mean, I live in Maine, and you can't do anything here realistically without a car. Yeah, that issue of the transition to EVs or even PHEVs or even hybrids is
Yeah.
still a big chunk of that is cultural.
Yeah.
It's about behavioral norms and advertising. And so talk about that a little bit. Let's just talk about the transportation side of things and how that culture element relates.
Well, the pieces about car culture, by the way, were partly about EVs and hybrids, but even more than that, just yeah, about cars in general, and about just. And by the way, this one is under paywall right now, but free preview for your viewers here, that I'm going to send out a non-paywall version of this later in the week, in hopes
Oh,
of
cool.
enticing people to see what's behind paywall right now and get a paid subscription for future paywall pieces, which I haven't done too many of so far. But this two-parter was inspired in part by, actually, I have it right here, Life After Cars, a wonderful new book that was just put out by Sarah Goodyear and Doug Gordon, who are the hosts
Wait,
of the
hold it up
Warren.
again. Hold it
Oh
up
yeah.
again. I've got the screen bigger.
Oh yeah. Life After Cars, Sarah Goodyear, Doug Gordon, Aaron Naparstek. Sarah and Doug host the War on Cars podcast. And they're good people. And my point with those pieces was not to say like everyone should stop driving cars, which is unrealistic and I think counterproductive to make an argument like that. But but more to just get others and myself, frankly, thinking about what are the harms and downsides of cars that we just tend to ignore and put out of our minds because they're inconvenient for us. And I would say that that's maybe a thread that runs through a lot of the stuff I've been writing. Not to moralize or demonize to the point of like I don't really want to be a scold. I mean, I'd like to,
right.
I'd like to be constructive here, but to say, hey, here's stuff that maybe we're not thinking about that we should be thinking about. Like, why don't we talk about this? Why don't we think about it?
Right.
This one, and to take a cultural framing to it. So I'm a big Disneyland person, so I wrote about Disneyland here. I wrote about, if you've ever been to Disneyland.
Long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. But for those who have, I was talking to the author of Life After Cars, Doug Gordon, who, like me, is a big Disneyland fan. And he made the point that Cars Land in Disneyland, which is a recreation of the fictional town Radiator Springs from the movie Cars, he made an offhand comment when we were chatting about the book. He said, you walk down Radiator Springs at Disneyland at California Adventure. He said, this is really the most pedestrian-friendly town you could ever think of. Which is why it's so pleasant, except it happens to just be designed for large talking cars. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I used that as a framing device for a piece about his book.
That's great.
Stuff like that. I thought it was just an interesting sort of way into the angle about, hey, like, let's just maybe not forget the fact that cars, kill way more people than anyone ever likes to imagine, and noise pollution and conventional air pollution. And there's no room for parks and cities because we devote so much room, and freeways divide up communities and all this other stuff that their book goes into. And not that I'm telling you should all stop driving cars tomorrow, because you can't. I know you can't, and I drive a car too. But maybe that's a starting point for going about our daily lives, thinking about politicians we might vote for, policies we might support or not support that could devote a little bit less land in our cities to cars and more land to other stuff as a starting point for longer term change. That was kind of the point of this two-parter. And then there was some stuff from the LA Auto Show about EVs as well, where I ran around the convention hall counting how many EVs there were from different car companies and tracked how the car companies were marketing themselves.
That's great. You're reminding me. Oh my God. I think I've got it here. Let me see. Oh, where is it? Oh yeah. In 2009, at the New York Times, I was still at the Times. There was a group. They still exist, where they're trying to take back parking space, like public parking space. And they did this. Let me show it, just because it relates to this idea of getting around our predispositions about the space we confer to automobiles versus other things. So hold on a second. This will be a time travel back to 2009.
Let's do it.
Oh, and it's not working. What do you know? Never mind. I
Oh,
was going to show the video. Normally there's a way to do it on here, but it didn't work. Anyway, they had like no parking day or something like that, where it was right around Columbia University, and groups of students and others took over parking spaces and turned them into like little mini parks and stuff.
Oh, that's nice.
But the idea was just to get people to go pause in their daily life and think, oh, that's public property, that space right there. Maybe that isn't the best use of it, having a car parked there. So jarring people, I think, is a good thing, getting us to kind of get out of our norms. Where do you go from here? Have you been at it now for a few months?
2 months. Yeah, I started, my first piece was October 20.
What would you like? Are you getting the sense of trajectory yet? You know, where do you want to take this? Do you want to include video, or what do you think about Substack generally?
Um,
I'm
yeah,
still
Substack is,
trying to figure it out.
yeah, I don't understand notes yet.
Me neither.
Yeah. But the email tool is simple and easy. I'd like to try video, and especially I'd like to try podcasting soon, and video as well. I want to do some subscriber exclusive events, which I definitely promised when I started, and would like to find time in the new year to do, like one per month. I have some ideas about where to start. But yeah, no, I've been writing really frequently to begin with. I need to pull back a little bit because I just like can't sustain this amount of time quite
Yeah.
yet. I think I've been doing like 2.5 posts per week, and they're pretty lengthy. So I need to allocate my time a little more carefully, just to not burn myself out too fast. But having
Yeah.
a good time.
That's good.
I mean, I have a lot planned for the next 2 months.
Do you have a sense, or yeah, this is more for other journalists who might be considering
Yeah,
this kind of jump. There are people here making a good living, like David Roberts, Emily, who have little businesses already. Do you anticipate this being like your primary source of income, or is it more of a ancillary thing with other stuff you want to do, or how's that going to work? I mean,
no,
I'm kind of semi-retired, so
yeah,
we own our house, thank goodness, and all that stuff. So it's not
that's
like
great. Well, I am early in my career relatively, so I definitely need a primary source of income, and right now this is it. There's definitely other stuff I hope to do.
So subscribe away, everybody.
Yes, please subscribe because I right now I'm banking on this. There's other stuff that I hope to do, but at least at the moment, that would be stuff that's on the side compared to this. Like I haven't ruled out, anything for the future. Like one of the nice things about having the flexibility of, not just being tied to a single full-time job is that I can pivot more quickly. But at the moment, the plan is, this is my job, and if other stuff comes up on the side, which I'm hoping, some stuff will, we'll see what happens with that. But right now it's just full steam ahead on climate colored goggles, and try to get enough people to pay for it to, make a living out of it.
Yeah, well, I hope that works out.
Thank you. Me too.
A number of people like Eduardo Porter, who's a columnist, former columnist at the Washington Post and the New York Times. He started here recently, and he's writing a column. I don't know how he does it. He's writing columns for the Guardian, and then he kind of posts pieces on Substack, and tries to build an integrated approach where they feed into each other. It's a lot of work that people put in on these efforts that we used to, in our newspaper jobs, et cetera, used to be sort of less stressful.
Yeah, I do wonder if and when, like, I hate these words, but like content creation and consumption in the journalism space if there will be a point of steadying, I guess. Like everything has been in
Right.
flux for a while. The models are changing. Is there going to be a point of equilibrium reached, or is it just going to be sort of in flux forever from now on as technology and modes of consumption continue to shift? I'll be curious to see what happens with that. Like, it would be nice if we reached equilibrium so that like people like me who are in the business of, finding things
Sorry.
out and telling people stuff, don't have to just learn new skills all the time. And we can just focus on,
Yeah, I know.
focus on
When I talk,
gathering information and distributing it. But man, I don't think that's going to happen.
I wish, everyone has this dream that things will stabilize. And like when I talk to young journalists or journalism students now, I kind of say the first order of business is adaptability and resilience, personal resilience.
Yeah.
And then you also have to know like how to write a story, and how to be
I don't even know
factual
if you're
and all
going to need
that.
to know how to write a story eventually. I
Well, right.
mean, yeah,
That's where AI is kicking in. Not to mention
yeah,
so many, like even audio podcasts increasingly now are hubbed on YouTube or on video
yeah.
podcasts
I mean, you
because
mentioned David Roberts. I mean, that's most of what he does these days. I mean, he doesn't,
yeah,
as far as I can tell, write too much. He does podcasts, and he's
yeah.
making
Well,
a
and
very
part
good
of that
living.
was physical. I don't know if you saw when he was writing
No, I
about how
remember.
his
Yeah,
arms, his hands stopped
yeah,
working.
yeah.
which gets back to this issue of personal sustainability. It's kind of
sustain what? Sustain your hands.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my approach to in a perfect world, like the reason I call my thing "Sustain What" is I'm trying to convey what I consider the key norm of journalism is asking questions, and like asking series of questions, so the same way a prosecutor would. Because the way to get toward reality, however complex or simple it is by parsing things out, like not starting with climate emergency, but saying who is in a state of climate emergency? How do you define emergency? And then where do we go with that information? And what I would love to do is like be able to close up shop so that, everyone sort of develops a more interrogatory approach to information, meaning the audience. And I then maybe we could have some sense of hope for the future. The audience we took for granted as journalists historically. You just tell them a story and they absorb it, and maybe some of them go, but now it seems the information environment is, and what I've learned about human behavior, is that information doesn't change people often, especially if it's
go ahead.
how it's presented.
No, I think that feels right. I think storytelling can change people's behaviors and ideas more effectively than information. Depends what types of stories they are.
Yeah, although
that's one of the reasons they've shifted towards this cultural thing.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, just telling people.
Have you ever talked to?
Unfortunately, not that effective sometimes.
Well, I know, and then comes someone like Trump, who's like the master storyteller.
Yeah.
Who, in times of stress, people migrate towards simple stories, and people just say, "Follow me, and it'll all be great." And windmills suck, and it's a tough situation. One person I've had on, I've known forever, who lives in Malibu there, Randy Olson, is kind of a science communication trainer, evangelist. He's really interesting in terms of his analysis of story and narrative. Part of which builds on the work of the South Park guys. I don't know if you ever seen it. There's a documentary about South Park.
No.
Where Trey, I can't remember which one of them is saying, when we're in the writing room, they got this board, and anytime you see an "and" on the board, so-and-so goes to the market and buys eggs, you have to replace it with a "but" or a "therefore." And that, because then you're telling a story. And, I went to the market and I bought some eggs and I made an omelet. Like, okay. But I went to the market and as I got to the counter, I realized I didn't have my wallet, but a stranger gave me money and I got the eggs, and blah, blah, blah. Conflict, drama, turns in the road. And Randy, he's done a lot of good work, not just in science arena, but in analyzing speeches and stuff. And he said Trump is like the master, unfortunately. But he's training people at the World Bank and elsewhere in how to tell a better story around science and policy. He'd be a cool person for you to get on the.
Yeah, Randy Olson. I'll look him up.
He wrote a book a long time ago called "Don't Be Such a Scientist," which is about science communication, and it was really cool. He's right there. Let's see. I wanted to. Someone saying hi from Berlin.
Oh, hello.
Nadia Yvette Chambers. Hallochen aus Berlin. I don't see questions, but if anyone out there has a question for Sammy or for me on journalism and how we can do things better, post for the next few minutes.
What else should we talk about?
We could talk a little bit more about the work. So, especially Hollywood. You're there, and you've done a lot of pieces, both when you were at the LA Times and now on the role of those screens, small screens and big screens.
Yeah,
what they could do better and what they're doing now. So maybe just talk through a couple of these stories. So here's one.
Oh yeah, train dreams. Well, I mean, this is something I started writing about at the LA Times. There were some interesting studies done, mostly out of USC but by some independent consulting groups to Good Energy, and they worked with Colby College, some researchers there, looking at how often climate change and sort of related subjects were mentioned in film and television. And basically, the finding was that very small percentage. There were studies looking at the last, forgetting, 5 years, 10 years, and let me just. Can we share my screen?
Yes, you can actually. If you have a separate screen open, there should be a little share screen thing, and then it's a two-step process. So you have to hit that, and then I put it on screen.
Let me see if I can find this here.
Is it one of your posts?
It's well. I'm going to start with an LA Times story. 1 second, and I'll bring up. Here we go. And you can see all of my crazy number of tabs. Okay, so what
now,
do I do? What do I do?
Look for a share screen button down at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, I found it. Okay, share screen.
And then
I've got it.
Okay, push that, and then wait a second. And it should pop up for me to show.
Hold on, first I've got to do my. Oh.
Or I could also search for
my system settings are screwed up.
What's the name of the story?
I'm just going to send you the link. I have it here in my. Is there a chat that I can?
There is a chat. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Let's start with this one.
Okay. Hold on. Oh, I see.
Yeah. So this was kind of my entree to Hollywood and in climate. This study that came out of USC looking at they analyzed 37,000 scripts of TV shows and films for the second half of the 2010s, which was quite ambitious. This is the Norman Lear Center, and they found that only 2.8% of scripts included any mention of climate change. And they didn't just look at climate change. They had a list of, God, I think like 3 dozen. Yeah, they had 3 dozen different climate keywords. They had greenhouse gas, sea level, clean energy, fossil fuel. Did you get the link there?
Well, yeah. Although the problem is I no longer have my LA Times subscription.
Oh no, Andy.
I know. Okay.
TV shows, that's fine.
Ignore climate. I'm going to find it.
Okay. Moral of the story, yeah. Even with 3 dozen different keywords, they only 2.8% said anything about climate change or anything related to remotely related to climate change.
Here we go.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Well, I'll pull it up. Yeah, I'm going to pull it up in a second. You'll see.
Yeah.
Because the LA Times posted it on Facebook.
Oh, there you go. And yeah, I love that I enjoyed that they mentioned this here. They said that they found the mention of the word dog 13 times as often as all 36 climate keywords put together.
Hold on, here we go. So just repeat what you were saying about some of these findings.
Oh yeah, just they had a list of 36 keywords, climate change, greenhouse gas, fossil fuel, clean energy. I'm just bringing up the study here because they have all of the keywords. They did this with Good Energy, which is a consulting firm that works
I know them.
Works with studios to and writers to try to get more storylines about climate and related topics in film and television. Yeah, clean energy, climate justice, care about the planet, energy efficient, solar, wind, renewable energy, ocean pollution. I mean, they were really comprehensive, and still they only found that of the 37,000 scripts they analyzed with USC from 2016 to 2020, that 2.8% said anything about any of these topics. So quite demoralizing. At least that was my reaction to it. And then there was another thing that I wrote about a couple of years later, and I'll send this to you too, just in case you're able to bring it up. Maybe you'll find it here if you search for a climate reality check would be the term. This was something else that Good Energy did as well, with in conjunction with researchers at Colby College and the University of Utah. They developed something called the climate reality check, which was basically a version of the Bechdel test. Are there Bechdel tests, for those unfamiliar, is is there a scene in your film or TV show with two women talking about something which was not a man? And so they did a climate version of the Bechdel test, and they applied it to 250 of the most popular films of the like 2015 to 2025 period, basically, roughly that period, based on IMDb ratings, just to get a rough sense of like 250 most popular films. And they said, or what was it, 2013 through 2022. And they said how many of these films passed the climate Bechdel test of having any mention of climate change in them. About 9.5%.
Yeah.
Which was, again, like, wow, that's low. And the one positive was that it went up. Of the first half of that decade, it was 5.6%. Over the second half of the decade, 13.6%. So, higher awareness.
Yeah.
So, these were the kinds of stories that got me thinking, like, okay, like, there's value here in writing about what are the representations of climate and clean energy and biodiversity and fossil fuels. What are they like in Hollywood right now? Because these are ways that people form ideas. It's like you were saying earlier, telling people facts and giving them journalism, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of power to change minds and ideas right now. But when stories outside of a political context do have a lot of power to shape people's views about the world. So I've been pretty closely watching Landman, which is a Taylor Sheridan show. The guy created Yellowstone. He's got a show on Paramount Plus right now, which is all about drama in the shale patch and the Permian Basin. I wrote a pretty aggressive review of season 1 because it had all sorts of like insane anti-wind energy propaganda.
Right.
Season 2 has been fabulous, actually. It's still kind of like boosterish about oil and gas, but at least just cut out so far. I haven't seen the latest episode yet, but has cut out all of the anti-wind stuff. Still waiting to see if there's anything that's if they incorporate wind in any way. They keep like putting shots of windmills on the horizon in interesting points in the show, but there hasn't been any wind storylines yet, so I'm waiting to see. You brought this up on your screen a minute ago. I just reviewed a movie that Netflix put out called Train Dreams, which feels like a climate parable to me, but even though it takes place about 100 years ago in the Pacific Northwest, and it's about logging and a wildfire and just, really interesting environmental story that, relevant to today with, all the stuff that Trump is doing with logging on public lands and trying to open up open up more resource extraction. And just anyone who's lived through or knows people who have lived through a terrible wildfire, I think if you watch this film, it'll feel pretty relevant to you. Definitely have some more pieces planned in this vein of just like what's on our screens right now that is making us think about this stuff. If anyone's watching The Morning Show on Apple, I'm still catching up on the most recent season, but there's a really relevant story about climate activists and an oil baron who's in conflict with them, and the TV journalists who are sort of investigating the activities regarding the conflict between it's a group that's basically based on Extinction Rebellion. It has like a very similar name.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, and so I think that's sort of a ripe area for coverage because it influences what people think.
Yeah, and there had been a significant push in Hollywood working with the National Academies has this Science and Entertainment Exchange, and there were other groups that had been working to try to work with writers' rooms to figure out how to get even incidental mentions of public health issues into scripts and stuff. And
yeah,
I think some of that has happened in the climate arena. I had Anna Joyner on here a couple of years ago with Scott Burns, the director, the movie writer and director, and sometimes having it be even the more subtle references that are in the flow of a bigger thing can be potentially more effective than a big movie, let's say like Day After Tomorrow, which had so many issues.
Yeah, Don't Look Up.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Did you write about Don't Look Up?
Tangentially. I say stuff like this all the time, but I think there's a role for everything. I think we need more of the sort of subtle, sort of passing references. And I think that also some people respond to the sort of big in your face stuff. personally don't look up, didn't do a lot for me because I'm already so like deeply enmeshed in climate, intensity all the time. I watched it and I was like, oh God, like I know the asteroids, like or comet or whatever is coming at us. Like this is so depressing. I know I know other people who watched it who, it actually did kind of serve as a wake up call for on climate, who are not like so embedded in that world already. It was very on the nose. Climate change is not actually like a, extinction level event. So it's exaggerated, but there are people for whom it did the job that Adam McKay wanted it to do. So I think there's a role for all different kinds of climate communications. I'm certainly not going to, begrudge Don't Look Up that.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with
Yeah.
you. The more the merrier. I was kind of critical of it on this blog when it came out because of just what you said. To me, it was the wrong the wrong picture, the wrong metaphor, the wrong and there were the remediation of the risk is very precise, like misdirect the asteroid or whatever. And here we are the asteroid, and it's the changes have to be across society in so many different arenas, But I it was enjoyable, and sometimes the problem with that kind of thing is it can then serve as ammunition for the Fox types who would just say they all hate us, and meaning us being that culture.
Yeah, I hear that, and I also kind of think that cat is so far out of the bag that it doesn't matter anymore. Like, I think they're going to say what they're going to say almost no matter what, and that it's just not worth crafting messaging and political strategy based on like, the climate deniers are going to say this, or the people who don't want climate action or don't like renewable energy are going to respond by whatever. Like, I just kind of think that's a losing and self-defeating strategy.
Yeah. And when you think, especially when you realize Fox News is almost entirely created as an entertainment device.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I don't know, a few things drive me crazier than people who, good faith people, or people who have the right means or the right, say it again. A few things drive me crazier than people who want to achieve good things, wringing their hands about, oh God, should we modulate a little bit this way or a little bit that way based on what our bad faith opponents might do or say. They're acting in bad faith. They're going to do or say whatever they're going to do or say, no matter what at this point. Like,
it's so clear.
Maybe in the 1980s or 1990s, like it might have made a difference. This is 2025. Like, forget about it. Like, follow your, authentic heart and don't worry about them.
Bingo. I think you're spot on. There's a comment that came in here that's worth exploring. Reattached retina on YouTube says, with Trump, you must figure in the longevity of his public life and the added authority that the fakery and glitz of The Apprentice and the puffery and fawning of Fox and Friends interviews gave him. So he's built, I guess they're saying his narrative has been building for, well before 2016 when he ran for president. Mm-hmm. Which I think gets to your point that that's a pretty mature part of the discussion that you're not just going to change by debating it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
And here's one more comment. Nadia Yvette Chambers, I was forewarned by a GOP insider that I should flee the U.S. because of what they were going to do. There have been some minor deviations, but he's been right about everything thus far. Oh boy.
I don't know what to do with that. Yeah.
I'm not moving from Maine. We like Maine. And
I like California a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Actually, you have written about Newsom in a couple of different incarnations, both yours and his. What's your take on him right now? And I assume you'll be doing more on him.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning to follow Newsom as he almost certainly runs for president. He's accomplished a lot of good things in California. It seems like he really wants to be president. I mean, I've written various articles about how his actions with regards to climate at this point, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I mean, my read is that they're mostly motivated at this point by what he thinks is going to, get him elected president.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like mostly political calculations right now. Whether those end up working or not, I don't know.
I don't think anyone does.
Making political predictions is pretty hard.
Do you have any tips for people on how to avoid the worst part of what comes with the overload we're all dealing with, meaning the daily Trump flood the zone with destructive acts stuff?
The only thing that I can say, and I don't know that, and this is the hardest thing to do probably, but just like try not to read too much coverage about like what this means for who's going to win elections. Like that's probably more advice for political reporters, honestly, because I just wish there wasn't so much of that. But like, I would just say like focus on stuff that, you know, informs your opinions and views of the world, and less on like the sort of popcorn, like what does this mean for what's going to happen in politics? Because nobody knows what it's going to mean for what's going to happen in politics. If your media diet is just like, you know, this is going to help Trump, or, you know, this is going to be bad for Trump, it's just like, that just feeds the highs and lows, and nobody actually knows anything about what's going to help. That stuff shouldn't even exist, frankly. I think most of that political journalism, I think a lot of it is just a waste. You know, a lot of the, you know, substantive news is depressing. I get that. But, you know, if there's some way to stay steady and level with just like, here's what you really need to know and what matters, that's better. I mean, obviously, just limiting media consumption to what's healthy for you is something that everybody should be doing anyway. Like, but to the extent that you want to, or feel like you need to consume a lot of news, like the stuff that's actually, here's what's happening in the world, and less just speculative, here's what this will mean for political outcomes that we don't actually know what's going to happen. I think less of that is healthier.
Absolutely. And there was a guy when I was still at Columbia at the Earth Institute, where I held forth for a few years, Jeff Schlegelmalch, who heads the National Center for Disaster Preparedness. This was early in COVID. I had him on my show, and I talked about information overload with him, and he said decision makers often, unfortunately, and we, you know, I think this applies to all of us, tend to, when crisis is unfolding, they tend to reach for more information. Give me more, give me more. And he said something, I think, that relates directly to what you were just saying. I might just actually show it. I think I found it.
When I studied sustainable development, it was at the Earth Institute at Columbia.
I know. What years were you there?
2010 to 14.
Oh, yeah. I was there from 2018 to like 2022, 23. Cool. I ran a little sustainability communication project. So anyway, Jeff said this. And again, I think this applies to the information storm we're all dealing with. I've actually observed over the years, whether it's in agencies or emergency operations centers, that when we're dealing with uncertainty, rather than pivot ourselves to manage with uncertainty, within uncertainty, we try to cram more and more information into our brains, trying to connect the dots. But the information is really just noise, more noise. And I think, you know, if news consumers, and you and I are consumers as well as producers, if you kind of just have some little filter ratchet thing that says, even if something's tugging at you, that you across your screen that really feels like it's getting at you, you know, about Trump becoming authoritarian, pulling back and just trying to remember, what can I do about that thing, as opposed to, do I need to absorb and share this information? And I think that's a path to at least less insanity, if not more sanity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I consume a lot of news, obviously, and I've been trying really hard to focus on consuming like what can I learn today that's different or new that I just don't already know, or just is going to add to my ability to, you know, do my job and understand the world. Like if it's just like, oh, okay, this is going to make me crazy and is not going to like give me anything that I don't already have, like I try to ignore it.
Yeah. Well, it's been great to have you on Sustain What, and
yeah, thanks for having me here. This is fun.
Return visit. Back in the COVID days, I used to do media gaggles like every Friday. We did like a lunch roundup with people here, and sometimes I think I should revive that, maybe a Friday gaggle, so we could just talk through some of these issues.
That sounds fun. I'd be happy to do that.
Good luck with climate colored goggles, and everyone who's watching, you can share this as soon as we're done. It'll also be on Substack video once I do some magical thing at the end. It's been streaming live, but then that ends and has to be posted. And get in touch about future conversations using that distracting scroll bar at the bottom. You can find Sammy, of course, at climatecoloredgoggles.com. And again, this is Sustain What. I appreciate you coming on to talk about your journalism journey and what's coming next, Sammy.
Thanks, Andy. Good talking with you.
Yeah, and hold on one second.